Welcome back, everyone. It's Jennifer. A few days ago, I had a guest artist here named Dawn, and she shared a fabulous technique for changing the look of a stamped image, a solid stamped image, with Copic markers. Well, today I am back with a spin on that technique. So it was totally inspired by Dawn, and I will link here to her video, where I added some details to a solid stamped image with a colorless blender Copic marker. I'll talk more about that in a moment if you're not familiar with what it is, but let's go ahead and do our stamping. Now for the background, the leaves, I'm using the leaves from this W+9 Spring Blooms stamp set. This is a 6x8 stamp set, so it's bigger than others. And many people ask what I store these bigger stamp sets in. And I will link to a video here that shows you the pockets that I use, because I use the smaller pockets for my smaller stamp sets or my regular stamp sets, but I have bigger pockets for these bigger stamp sets. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with the stamping. I am using W+9 ink. This is the Mojito color. I really love their ink colors. Let me show you some of the others that I really like. They're very rich colors, very vibrant, and just beautiful. It's one of my favorite lines of colors of inks. Now I'm going to go ahead and stamp these leaves onto some Neenah white cardstock. Any cardstock would work. I really like the Neenah white. And I'm just going to stamp these leaves with the green ink. Now this ink will be splotchy at first, but it'll dry nice and smooth and even. Now it is very important for this technique that you use one of three types of inks. Either this W+9 Pure Color dye ink, the Hero Art Shadow ink, or the Simon Says Stamp ink. These three inks are formulated the same and they work for this technique. Now you could try this technique with whatever dye inks you may have, but I know that with these three inks, this technique works wonderfully. While I let that green ink kind of absorb into the paper, I'm going to go ahead and pick out my sentiments. So I have this stamp set from W+9 that has a bunch of different hello images in different size scripts, and then tiny little greetings that team along with the hello. I decided to use the tiny greeting, but then use these wood veneer words from Freckled Fawn. I love this pack of wood veneer because they work great for cards or scrapbooking, and I decided to use the hello from that set. Okay, so before we add the sentiment, I decided I wanted to add some more depth to my stamping there. So I'm actually inking up the same stamps, but this time with a slightly darker olive green color. This is the W+9 Appletini color. I'm inking up the stamp and then using a dry cloth to dab away some of the ink from the edges of the leaves. Then I'm going to stamp that directly on top of the image that I have already stamped. So I'm going to do this with all three of them, ink them up with this green ink. So this is a little bit darker than the first one we did. Wipe some of it away with a dry cloth and then stamp directly over the other image. Since this is a clear stamp, I can see through and make sure I'm stamping directly on top. If you're unsure, you could use a stamp positioner to make sure that you're stamped directly on top. But with images like this one, it's pretty easy to do. Now the only reason I'm doing this is to add a little dimension or the look of dimension to my leaves. You could totally skip this part if you wanted to. Now you may have noticed while I was doing this, I got a little bit of ink in that bottom right corner. It must have gotten on my finger and I got it there. Now I would never start this over. This is my trick. I just take a craft knife and gently scratch the ink away. Then I come in with a good eraser and erase away any of like the pilling that you get from scratching it, and it kind of smooths it out and nobody will ever know that ink was there. This is a great way to fix any boo-boos you may have and then not have to start over. So now it's time for the technique. You see all those little dots there on the leaves? I added those details with a Copic marker colorless blender. Now if you aren't familiar with Copic markers, this is the colorless blender that's used to kind of move the ink when you color with Copic markers. However, even if you don't have Copic markers, it might be worth it just to get this one marker for this technique. I actually bought an extra marker, this Zero Copic marker colorless blender for this technique because I was afraid it might damage the tip of my marker. Now I have found this technique hasn't damaged the tip of my marker, but if you want to be sure, you could just get an extra like I did, or you can get replacement nibs. So here's a stamped image I did on scrap paper. You could see how much it kind of bleached the paper with this colorless blender. So the ink reacts with the colorless blender and it's almost like you're touching it with bleach, and it just kind of erases the ink wherever you touch the tip of the marker to that stamping ink. So again, this works with only these inks that I've found so far. It may work with others, you can try, but I found they work with the W+9 inks, Hero Art Shadow inks, or the Simon Says Stamp inks. Now you'll see that all I do is just lightly touch the tip, that little point of this marker, onto the stamping, and I just go over it a few times, and it kind of erases the color and adds that soft detail. Now you could use a white pen, but that would be bright white dots. This just ends up kind of softening the color for the dots. I don't know, I just think it's really pretty in real life. Now, Dawn showed you how you could use this to create highlights in your flowers. I just wanted to add this kind of doodling effect. Now, I will go back and reinforce each of the dots with the tip of the marker just to make sure that it really absorbs into the paper and kind of bleaches in each of those spots. You could draw lines, you could do doodles, you could do whatever you want. But it's really cool how this Copic Colorless blender reacts with that ink and kind of erases it. So if you would have colored these leaves with Copic marker and then come in with the Colorless blender, it behaves the same way. This is just a really fast technique and a great way to add little details to your solid stamp images such as this one. Now that we have those leaves done, it's time to add our sentiment. So I'm going to take that wood veneer Hello embellishment and add that with Ranger Multi-Medium. This is a matte finish adhesive that's super strong. Now when I bought the bottle, I actually took the nozzle off of it. So you just open it up, pop the nozzle off, and I've put on this replacement nozzle. I think this is meant for paper quilling, but it's got this fine applicator, this fine tip applicator. I've mentioned in other videos, I'm trying out various fine tip glue applicators, and I'm trying to pick which one I think is the best. So you'll see me use different ones in different videos, and I'm still unsure. I want to make sure they don't get clogged or have any problems. But here I'm trying out this one, and I so far seem to like this. So I'm putting little dots of adhesive on the back of the embellishment. Now I'm going to take my tweezers here, and I'm going to use this to place my embellishment. This is a great way to place embellishments without your big fingers getting in the way. I have that problem all the time. So I can see where I'm going to put this down, and then that glue dries pretty quickly. Another nice thing about this glue is if it does ooze out of the side, it dries matte, which is great. So this nozzle has this little cap that you can put on once you've cleaned it off and made sure that it's not clogged. And I'm also trying out, if you've watched my other videos, this fine line applicator filled with the same adhesive. And the jury's still out on which one I like better, but I promise you I will let you know as soon as I make a decision. So I just want to make sure I really like it before I recommend it. Okay, so now it's time to stamp the rest of my sentiment. This is the Sweet Friend from W+9, and I'm stamping that with my favorite black Hero Arts dye ink. Before we put the card together, I wanted to add some little hearts on the background. So I'm using a stamp set from W+9 called Little Bits. This is a great small stamp set, so it's inexpensive, and it has lots of sequins, stars, and heart images all over it in different sizes, even outlines. So these are great for kind of scattering on a card. So I'm going to go through and stamp a bunch of hearts with the W+9 Sweet Nectar. This is probably one of my favorite ink colors of all time. It's like a muted coral color that's just gorgeous. So I'm going to stamp all the hearts with this. Then I'm going to do a technique that I did on the leaves where I come back with another color and stamp right over it. So I'm going to ink up the hearts with the Sweet Gelato, which is like a pinkish red color that's just beautiful. I'm going to ink up the heart with that, and off screen, sorry I went off screen here, I didn't mean to. I used my cloth to kind of dab away some of the ink and then stamp it directly on top of the other hearts that we've already stamped. This is just like we did with the leaves in the background with the two different colors of green. And this allows us to have hearts that are kind of two colors, that coral color and that red color. It's just a great way to add the look of dimension to your stamping, and is great for simple images just like these. So now I'm going to go ahead and assemble the back of the card. I decided to trim this down. I took about 1/4 inch off all 4 sides of this white panel. I wasn't really sure where I was going with this when I designed it, so that's why I started with the bigger piece. Now I have another piece of white cardstock here, and I'm taking that same Sweet Nectar ink that I showed you before, the coral color, and I'm rubbing it directly on the outside edge of the white cardstock to create a matte that will perfectly match the stamping that we just did. To give this piece even more color, I'm using a sponge dauber, just an inking tool, and the Sweet Gelato, that reddish color I just used on the hearts, and adding that just to the corners of this piece, just to kind of pull everything together. I really love the look of the two colors as a matte. Now that piece was cut slightly bigger than this white background that we've stamped on, and I'm just going to adhere them together kind of off kilter there, just for some interest. Now I have a piece of wood paper here. I thought this would tie in with that wood veneer hello greeting. I have my Distress ink in Vintage Photo, just a brown Distress ink, and an ink blending tool here just to add some definition on the edge of that wood paper, just to make it a little bit darker, and just rubbing it along the edges. I felt like this wood paper would tie in nicely with the wood veneer sentiment that we added. Now this wood paper is cut to be slightly bigger than that stamped piece that we have in the center, and I will also adhere this kind of off kilter so it's a little off, so we have these layered pieces together. Now I originally thought I was just going to stick this onto a regular size note card, but I actually decided I liked it as is, so I decided to cut a small note card to glue behind this. So I have a white top folding note card that I cut. This is the same size as that stamped piece, which is, let's see, 3 3/4 by 5 inches. I put some adhesive on. I'm just going to stick this on the back so it's kind of hidden behind all of those layers. So that's our finished card, and it still stands up nicely even though those layers are a little off kilter there. And whenever I can, I like to stamp an additional greeting on the inside of the card. And that W+9 Hello stamp set that I showed you has lots of little messages. So I decided to also stamp the I miss you on the inside of the card. I think it's a great way to kind of pull it all together and finish the message. Now, of course, I've got my Zig Wink of Stella clear shimmer marker, and I'm going to color over all of my hearts here. Once I've added that shimmer to all of the hearts, I just love the shine that you get. I'm going to go ahead and put some glossy accents on the top of that too. Now this is that same fine line applicator that I told you I'm testing out. This one, however, is filled with the glossy accents. My glossy accents, sometimes we get clogged. A lot of people have problems with that. So I was trying out this applicator to see what I think. And I really like how it's got that fine line that allows you to apply the glossy accents in small amounts in tiny little areas. So I'm going to go ahead and apply the glossy accents right on top of these hearts. I really love the Wink of Stella shimmer underneath the glossy accents. The glossy accents kind of magnifies the shimmer, and it really looks pretty. And it looks like you added little embellishments here, but really you just created them yourself with stamps. And by the way, this fine line adhesive bottle here, it has a cap that's supposed to prevent getting clogged, and I've had luck with it so far, but I promise to do a review video on all these bottles once I decide which I think is the best. Okay, so there you have a way you can combine some of your stamping inks along with a Copic Colorless blender. Again, this was inspired by my friend Dawn, and I will link to her video where she was a guest artist here, so you can check that out. As always, if you are interested in any of the products I used here, you can look in the YouTube description below where I'll have links to multiple sources, or you can check out my blog at jennifermcguireinc.com. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you soon.